Hello everyone, welcome to your third animal breeding and welfare class that you have with myself. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start sharing my screen straight away, and we're going to start off just with a bit of a recap of what we had touched on Friday. So the main areas that we covered on Friday was the 5 freedoms. So like I said on Friday, we should be able to list these off the top of our heads without having to check our notes. So just to revise them: freedom from thirst, hunger, and malnutrition, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, freedom from fear and distress, and freedom to express normal patterns of behavior. So these are the 5 freedoms that all animals have the right to. So these are their rights that we have to make sure to abide by. So if we are found to be breaching any of these, then we could be subject to penalties. We could be subject to prosecution, again, depending on the severity of the breach. So the application of the 5 freedoms at farm level reflects good husbandry and management. So basically, by examining how each of these 5 freedoms is applied on the farm can give us a good idea about the standard of the management and the standard of the husbandry on the farm. So they are a fairly good indicator of how the farm is actually run. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to skip down into today's slides, because on Friday we had gone through each of those in a little bit more individual detail. So what we're just going to do is we're going to skip past each of those that we've done, and we're just going to take a very quick look at some of the legislation that does affect us. So I don't expect you to know, the names of the council directives, or, the dates that they were amended or anything like that. But it is just good to familiarize ourselves with kind of the phrasing and the actual specific legislation and laws that are in place. So, for example, one of the more recent amendments to animal welfare legislation was the ban on individual stalls for pregnant sows and gilts from 4 weeks after service to 1 week before expected time of farrowing, and the use of tethers. So basically what that means is, on pig farms in Ireland, once the animal has been served, 4 weeks later, that sow now has to be in loose housing. So she's not allowed to be kept in a crate. She's not allowed to be kept in an individual stall. She has to be housed in loose housing, in which she's able to move around. She can access shelter and fresh air. And then it's only when she is within 1 week of her expected farrowing time then that she can be moved into a farrowing crate. Okay. There was also then amendments to the quality of flooring surfaces that had to be available, increasing the living spaces available for sows and gilts, and it allows sows and gilts to have permanent access to materials for rooting. So again, these are amendments that have been made in recent years due to maybe public concerns, maybe it's due to kind of quality assurance, and maybe it's due to European guidelines for best practice. There's a number of different things that can influence animal welfare legislation. And as well as that, it will always be updated over time to reflect that. So again, it's up to us to stay up to date with any new legislation that is issued. They've introduced a higher level of training and competence on welfare issues for our stock people. And so this is from January 2013, basically, all of this new legislation was introduced. Okay, so this is just some other amendments then that have been added. So different light requirements and maximum noise levels, permanent access to materials for rooting and playing, like we had said. So as well as that, you will see in, for example, in the weanling houses for piglets and stuff, you will often see that they have wooden blocks held on chains and stuff like that. So that's basically there to for what we would call enrichment of the environment. So giving them something that they can actually play with and interact with it is also an included amendment. So that must be there. Permanent access to fresh water, additional restrictive conditions to carry out mutilation on pigs. So again, that mutilation is regarding their teeth clipping, the tail docking that is carried out. So those restrictions basically mean that you must have a veterinary prescription for that. The vet must sign off on the need for you to clip the tails or dock the tails and clip the teeth. And in general, the reason that we are doing that is to prevent harm to the sow. So if the piglets don't get their teeth clipped, then they will actually cause apologies, sorry, I'm after changing the slide. They will cause damage to the teats of the sow, and they will also tend to chew on one another's tails, which will obviously cause distress and harm to the piglets. So, but we must just have a veterinary practitioner sign off on that. A minimum weaning age of 4 weeks. So again, so there must be a minimum at least 4 weeks of age before they are weaned off. And again, these all apply from 2003. So again, we just see how things will change over time. Prohibits use of individual pens from 8 weeks. So this is more so looking at calf welfare. So there's minimum dimensions for individual pens and for calves kept in groups. So again, making sure that they have sufficient space. The calves are not to be tethered except in very specific circumstances. So it's illegal for us to keep our calves tethered unless there is a very specific reason for doing so and that you can justify it, but otherwise cannot be allowed. Must be fed according to physiological needs. So again, we know that there tends to be a welfare issue around veal meat. The reason being is that veal calves are fed nothing but a liquid milk diet. But something that we're going to look at later on in the semester is how calves require different types of feed in order for them to develop their digestive system adequately. So that's what this one is referring to. Their feed must contain sufficient iron, and a minimal daily ration of fibrous food should be provided to each calf over 2 weeks. So that's again feeding into the development of their digestive system, and calves must not be muzzled. So these are just some of the different directives that are being applied on farms across the country. This is a very interesting YouTube video that I expect all students to go and watch at the end of class. I will post it on Moodle. And basically you will also then, just to ensure that everybody has watched the video, there's going to be a quiz that needs to be completed at the end. And there's no point getting your friends to do it for you because every individual student is going to have a different set of questions. So I expect everybody to go and watch a very interesting YouTube video on an animal behaviour and welfare expert known as Dr. Temple Grandin. For anybody who has not come across her before, she is an American professor of animal welfare and behaviour. And she has basically revolutionised the way that we understand animal behaviour and the way that we carry out animal handling. And she is responsible for massive changes in the agricultural sector. So I expect you all to go and watch that YouTube video on her and to complete the quiz that has also been uploaded on Moodle. So that quiz is open until 1:30 on Tuesday afternoon. You will have 20 minutes to complete the quiz once you've started it. And I expect everybody who has watched the class to participate in it, and I will be keeping tabs. Okay. So something that Temple Grandin has helped us to understand better, like I said, is animal behaviour. So behaviour is what an animal does. And when we better understand animals' behaviour, what is normal behaviour, what is abnormal behaviour, we can better understand how best to manage them. And ethology is basically the science of animal behaviour, and it attempts to study what an animal does and why an animal does it. And when we have a good understanding of ethology or animal behaviour, we can then classify behaviour patterns to understand how they may be modified by the environment, so how we can change their environment to affect their behaviour, and then how they can provide indications of normality or abnormality. So when we see an animal behaving normally or abnormally, that can give us an indication of how that animal is in terms of production, health, and welfare. So something that a couple of people have mentioned in the chat on Friday was, for example, an animal isolating themselves. So we should know, like as farmers or as farm operators, farm workers, whatever it is, we should be able to identify that if an animal has isolated itself, that can be an indication of something being wrong health-wise. It might be a sign that they're suffering from illness. We know that if it's coming up to calving time or lambing time, that could be a sign that that animal is approaching calving or approaching lambing. A well-trained eye and an understanding of animal behaviour are first essentials of the good stock person. So if we don't understand normal behaviour, then we won't be able to identify abnormal behaviour. All right, so the better our understanding is, the better it is for us. So we have abnormal and normal behaviours. All right, so Actions of an animal may be innate or may be acquired. So something that is innate is something that the animal automatically knows to do based on their instincts. They don't have to be taught how to do it. They don't need to be taught how to do it. They just automatically know. And then we also have acquired behaviors. And those acquired behaviors are behaviors that that animal has learned over time. So, for example, when a cow licks the calf after birth and the calf struggles to its feet and seeks the teeth of the cow, these are innate actions. So the cow doesn't have to be taught to go and lick the cleanings off the calf. It just automatically senses to do that. The same way that the calf doesn't have to be taught that to seek out the teat. Okay, so sometimes we do have to provide assistance or help them along, but they automatically know that that is what they are supposed to do, without us ever having to teach them. Okay, but then you have an example of a cow that trots to the feed truck when she hears the quad bike coming. Is performing an action which has been entirely acquired by learning. So when that cow was born, they didn't naturally start to follow a quad bike. All right, that is something that they have learned. So they have learned that because they now associate, when the quad bike comes, they associate that with being fed. So they have now made that connection by it occurring repeatedly. So the more that something is repeated, the quicker the animal is to learn it. Okay, so another example then of either innate or learned behaviour. So a month-old calf that runs across the field to its mother and immediately latches onto a teat is performing an innate action that has now been reinforced by learning. So this is kind of a combination of the two. So when that calf was born, it automatically knew to seek out the teat. But now the calf has learned that when it seeks out the teat and starts to suckle, then that it will be provided with milk. So that has now been reinforced, so they are more likely to go along with that behavior. The stimuli, so a stimuli is something that stimulates something or something that kind of signals for something to start. So the stimuli to innate and acquired actions. So we want to identify what are the things in an environment that is going to encourage an animal to behave in a particular way. So what is going to stimulate an animal to go and seek out its mother and to start sucking? That is going to be reinforced, or that is going to be simulated by that animal being hungry. So, and that is an example of an environmental stimulus. So we can have external stimulus. So for example, heat, cold, predators, etc. So if an animal is very warm, they may go and seek out shade. If an animal is very cold, then they will go and seek out, maybe shelter from the wind, for example. So, and then if they are in the presence of a predator, they will be more likely to bunch together. So again, these are behaviors that we identify in them that have been stimulated by something in the external environment. Then we have internal stimuli. So for example, hunger or thirst. An animal that is hungry will begin to graze, or a calf that is hungry will seek out its mother. Thirsty, they will go to the water truck or go to the stream or the river. Or internal can also be reinforced by external as well. So moving on then, kind of keeping on the same tone of abnormal and normal behaviour. So actions of farm animals such as cattle are directed towards maintenance of homeostasis. So what is this homeostasis? What does that word even mean? So homeostasis is basically another word for balance. So thinking about it in terms of humans, for example, we try to maintain homeostasis by changing what our body does. So if we get too warm, we will start to sweat more. And the reason for that sweating is to try and cool down our external temperature. And then if we are cold, then we will start to shiver. And the reason that we start to shiver is to try and generate heat. So it's all about trying to keep a balance. And then if we go a little bit out of balance, our body will start to do things to try and account for that, or to try and bring that balance back. And animals will do that as well. So if they get too cold, they will go and seek out shelter. If they get too warm, they will go and seek out shade. So they're trying to maintain that balance as well. So they're basically trying to maintain comfort and trying to maintain safety. Another reason that an animal will act in a particular way is investigation of the environment. So we already spoke about how, how the phrase nosy cow came about. It came about because cattle and animals in general are extremely nosy. They are very nosy. If there is something novel or something new in their environment, they will go and seek it out to investigate. And how are they going to investigate it? More than likely, they're going to smell something, they're going to try and taste it, they're going to try and eat it to try and identify what it is, try and figure it out. So again, we need to be wary of that in terms of if there are things in their environment that we don't want them to ingest. Establishment and preservation of security and the social order. So another thing that we talked about was how animals and herds and flocks automatically tend to have their own hierarchy. So animals within the herd that are more dominant than others, and animals then that are going to be more submissive than others. And that's obviously going to affect how the herd behaves. And they're going to try and maintain that social order as best as possible. So say for example, if you introduce, say you have bought in, a couple of cows with calves at foot, for example, and you introduce them to the rest of the herd, there's going to be a couple of days there where that herd is going to have to re-establish its social order because you've introduced new animals. So, and therefore they will take their own time then to try and figure out where these new animals stand within the herd. So little things like that will influence how a herd is going to behave. And then preservation and expansion of the family. So we know that one of an animal's strongest instincts as well is going to be to reproduce in order to preserve the family. So that's when we see behaviours around bulling time, around reproduction. When we see cows mounting, for example, that is all, a behaviour that they are completing based on reproducing. So that's going to be sexual behaviors and also maternal behaviors as well. So everything that a cow does to protect her calf. So be that, if you have a cow that is quite wild after calving down, so part of that is due to the excessive hormones in her system, but also she's going to have this naturally protective instinct within her, and she's going to behave according to that. So again, that is where this is coming from, is the preservation of the family. So she is protecting her calf in that way. Same thing goes with her being looking after the calf or seeking out the calf. If they get separated, she's going to vocalize a lot, because that's her own natural behavior. So then at the same time, we also need to think about these abnormal behaviors. So say, for example, if we have a cow that rejects her calf, we would consider that to be abnormal behavior, and we now have to go and intervene in that case, to make sure then that we provide the best chance for the calf as possible. So maintenance behavior. Maintenance behavior includes eating, drinking, urinating, defecating, grooming, resting, sleeping. So if we were to categorize all of those behaviors, they are all innate behaviors. There is none of them that we need to teach the animals to do. They will naturally do all those things. They naturally have all those instincts within them. So they are known as innate behaviors. So eating, so the need to replace nutrients used up in the metabolism and the presence of palatable. So that palatable foods means foods that basically appeal to the animal. They taste good, they smell good, and the animal enjoys eating them. So the presence of palatable foods can increase food consumption by stimulating the appetite. So even if an animal is hungry and you provide them with unpalatable food, they won't eat it because they don't like it. It doesn't appeal to them. There is a physical constraint on food intake, is the quantity of undigested material in the rumen. So even if an animal has higher nutrient requirements, for example, but they have no space in their rumen, they're not going to keep eating until they meet the requirements because they feel full. So take, for example, I think we mentioned this already last week as well. So a ewe that is approaching lambing, her requirements for food are greater, but her appetite is smaller. So in that scenario, we have to intervene there and feed her more concentrates to meet her requirements. because her appetite is not going to allow her to meet her needs. If a cow fails to eat enough to meet nutrient demands in early lactation, she can feel hungry but also full up at the same time. So resting and sleeping. So cows rest for between 9 and 12 hours in any 24-hour period. Usually they lie on their brisket with both forelegs tucked in underneath the body. The weight of the abdomen rests on one hind limb and the other hind limb is stretched out to one side. So this is naturally the way that they will lie down. But again, if we see an animal lying down in an abnormal way, so say for example, if there is an animal flat out on its side, I'm sure we've all had that experience of going out and checking the animals and you get a fright. You're going over saying, please let her be asleep, please let her be asleep. Because when she's lying out flat on her side, we know that it's it's less normal for them to rest that way. So so again, you might get a fright to go over and make sure that she's all right, because it wouldn't be the normal way for them to rest. They have a slight preference to lying on the left side, but do change sides to avoid putting excess pressure on the laid on limb. And then their investigative behavior. So animals have basic innate. So again, innate is something that they naturally have that they don't have to learn. So they have a basic natural instinct to learn by exploration of their environment. So they will seek security from learned and instinctive danger. So they're going to try and learn from their environment to try and know if something is safe or not. And if faced with a novel object, so something new or something that they don't identify immediately, the cow or calf will smell it, lick it, and if possible, attempt to eat it. So again, they are trying to learn about something, so that is going to be their natural way to do that. So if we, again, I mentioned it on Friday, if we have issues, for example, with maybe illegal dumping in one of our fields, and the animals will go over and eat that rubbish because it's something new, it's something that they don't recognize, and that's how they familiarize themselves with something. This investigative behavior is instructive, so they do learn from it, but it can get cattle into danger, obviously, if they ingest something that isn't safe. So, for example, eating lead paint, polythene bags, pieces of wire, old car batteries. So again, if there's issues with dumping, if there's, remnants of stuff lying around the field that you weren't aware of, if a plastic bag blows into the field, again, this is what they will naturally do. So, and that is why it's so important for us to keep an eye out for anything like that when we're out walking our paddocks. So social behavior. Cattle are herders, so they are naturally prone. So we know that there are certain animals that like to be alone, and we know that there are certain animals that like to move in groups, and cattle are herders. They prefer to be in groups rather than in isolation. So I know, again, last week when we were talking about ways to move animals to keep them calm, we talked about not moving them on their own. They prefer to move in groups. Their herding instinct in non-aggressive herbivores like cattle and sheep has evolved as an innate activity. So again, it is a natural instinct designed to protect the individual. So again, they're they are normally identified as prey. So when they move in groups, there is less of a risk to them. So for example, a cow on her own meets a lion. She may have a 50-50 chance of survival, but a cow in a group of 40 has a 1 in 40 chance of being killed. So in that way, they seek protection in numbers. In small stable herds, older cows tend to assume dominance and newly arrived heifers adopt a submissive attitude. However, some cows will bully some heifers. So if they see a heifer that they think is getting out of her place or encroaching on them, they will make sure and remind her that they are the dominant animals in the herd. So make sure that they sort themselves out before critical times like calving. So like I said earlier on, if you're introducing new animals into the herd, make sure and do it at a time that isn't critical for their performance. So if, for example, a heifer is coming close to calving and she gets a bit of a puck off an older cow, that can obviously cause significant damage. So in that scenario, you would want to make sure and have them introduced well before that. Make sure heifers and other new arrivals are not prevented by other cows from getting to the feed trough. So again, this is going to come back to kind of our spacing issues. So we know our animals should have sufficient feed space, and we should be measuring measuring our feed space and dividing by the number of animals in that pen. So that's going to be less of an issue if we are feeding ad lib silage. So if they have sufficient silage that they can go and feed themselves at any time during the day or night, it's less of an issue. But if we are going and feeding in a restricted feeding space, so that means that we are going and giving them just a couple of forks of silage or whatever it is per pen, then they're obviously going to be competing for that. So in that scenario, you have to ensure that there is sufficient space that they all can feed at the same time without having to compete with each other as much. Cows can remember between 50 to 70 other individual cows. So they will identify animals that are new, and they will recognize members of their own herd. In stable herds of 50 cows or less, each cow will remember her place. So there's less chance or less risk of that competition, of that bullying in smaller herds. But then if we start to go over that 70 cow number, then there is a greater risk of it. So aggression tends to be minimized except for when new heifers arrive, because like I said, they're going to have to reestablish their dominance. And it may be easier for a new heifer to go unnoticed in a larger herd. So abnormal behavior. So abnormalities of behavior are a subject of much concern to the farm animal or ethologist. So especially in intensive systems. So for example, battery cages for laying hens, stalls for sows, veal calves, they tend to be, they're more restrictive. The animals aren't as, the environment isn't as enriched for them. So in that way, they will tend to then start performing abnormal behaviors. And these may limit, so these living conditions may limit the expression of normal activities and may provoke unusual behavior patterns. For example, bar chewing in sows. So again, they will do something to try and enrich their environment. And what I mean by that is basically they are bored in their living conditions as they become bored. And so they just start doing these bad habits out of boredom or to try and enrich their environment. And these abnormal behaviors are also known as stereotypies. So bar chewing may be abnormal, but that does not imply that it does harm or causes distress. So take, for example, biting your nails. A lot of people have that and it's seen as a bad habit or an abnormal habit, but it doesn't necessarily cause any harm. It's just something that people do. You might do it when you're stressed or when you're worried or just out of boredom. So some recent evidence shows that when sows compulsively chew the bars of their stalls, this releases beta endorphins. So we know endorphins are hormones that are released when we are happy. So when they do that, it makes them feel better. Cattle deprived of the opportunity to perform normal activities may engage in a number of purposeless activities, such as tongue rolling. So these behaviors, they have no purpose. They serve no purpose to the animals. They don't necessarily cause harm. Some can, they don't all, but again, they are a sign that there is something missing from the animal's environment. It is common in veal calves on all liquid diets, and other abnormal behaviors include urine drinking and milk sucking as well. So this here is just a photograph of a sow that we can see here is crib biting or bar biting, sorry. So again, she is very restricted in her movement here. She doesn't really have anything to enrich her environment or to keep her entertained, basically. So she just is going to pick up this behavior or this activity just out of pure boredom. So here we have a YouTube video of crib biting. So I'm just going to open that up. We don't need the sound. So if you can't hear the sound, don't worry too much about it. It's more just to show what the animals actually do. So in this case, hopefully you can all see that. So here we see that the horse is biting or chewing on the door of the stable. So again, it's more so from the fact that she's being kept indoors out of boredom, and this is just something that the animal does to deal with the boredom. So in that scenario, I would be a little bit worried in terms of the wind sucking can cause issues with bloat. So again, some are harmless, and then some do cause some issues. So just to be aware of that. So stress and stressors. So stress is the disruption of homeostasis through physical or psychological stimuli. So what that means is stress is basically anything that is going to disrupt the animal's internal balance. Okay, so that can be anything from heat stress, cold stress, hunger, thirst, a predator in the environment, regular movement, a change in their routine, anything like that. So we know that animals like routine. So take, for example, if you ever heard of dairy cows and they're used to being milked in the afternoon at 4:30. And if you don't start milking until 5:30, they will be there waiting for you impatiently. So, you know, they like their routine. So anything that upsets their routine can cause stress. And then anything that causes that stress is known as a stressor. So a drought, for example, would be a stressor. Or, you know, a neighbour's dog breaking into the field and disrupting the animals would be a stressor. So anything that is a stressor, those stressors can be mental, physiological, anatomical, or physical reactions. So again, an animal that becomes lame, that is a stressor for her. If she falls ill with a disease, that is going to be a stressor. So anything that upsets her internal balance can cause stress. So just going through those in a little bit more detail. So stress is usually described as an environmental disturbance, such as heat, cold, malnutrition, overwork, fear, or emotional upset. So again, anything that disrupts her internal balance is going to cause stress for her. It affects the workings of the body so as directly to provoke disease or to reduce resistance to infection. So this is the case for animals, humans, anything like that, okay? When your stress goes up, your immune system goes down every time. So if you think about times that you were more likely maybe to get sick, for example, around exam time, if you were not getting enough sleep, okay, straight away, those are going to be 2 times that humans are most likely to fall ill, is when you're stressing over exams or when you're not getting enough sleep. Both of those are going to be stressors to us. And those stressors are going to diminish our immune system. They hold our immune system back, and that obviously is going to make us more likely to fall ill. And the exact same is the case for our farm animals. There is a precise but limited way of describing the common physiological response of animals to stressors. And this is called the general adaptation syndrome and has 3 distinct stages. So basically, when an animal becomes stressed, there are 3 stages that follow on from that, or 3 stages that occur as a result, and it is then that has the knock-on effect on the animal. So basically what I'm going to do now, so I know that this is already going to be hitting just over the 30-minute mark. That video that I want you to watch about Temple Grandin is about 7 minutes long, and then you also require a few minutes to complete the quiz afterwards. So what we are going to do is I'm going to finish off the class at that stage. We are going to come back and go through those 3 distinct stages of the general adaptation syndrome on Friday. But what I want you to do, hopefully everybody has logged in to watch this video in the meantime. And same as last week, we're going to start off the class just doing a little bit of a revision and making sure that everybody fully understood what was discussed today. So again, the main points being about innate behaviours versus acquired behaviours, examples of abnormal behaviours that we would identify in our animals, and then how we can use our understanding of animal behaviour to reduce stress around animal handling, which is something that we had mentioned the last day, and now hopefully you will have a better understanding of it from watching Temple Grandin's video. So I'm going to sign off with that, and I will see you all on Friday. I do expect everybody who has watched this video to complete the quiz as well, and I will be keeping tabs on who has or hasn't completed it. So I will speak to you all bright and early on Friday morning, and I hope everybody stays safe in the meantime. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will speak to you on Friday.